The pirate ships appeared on the scanner like 3 red dots moving fast through hyperspace. They were gaining on the Soul Runner, their more powerful engines cutting through the distance between them. "How did they find us?" Jihu asked, his hands moving over the navigation console with his good hand. His injured hand lay useless in his lap, the fingers still curled and unresponsive. "They must have been monitoring Velthara 7's spaceport traffic," Hyun said. He was pulling up the ship's defensive systems, what little they had. The Soul Runner was a cargo hauler, not a warship. They knew someone would try to rescue the Cubs eventually. "They've been waiting. Can we outrun them?" Hyun checked the engine readings. "Not in hyperspace. Their ships are faster. They'll catch us in about 20 minutes. Jihu's mind raced. 20 minutes. They needed a plan, something to give them an advantage. The Soul Runner wasn't armed with weapons. They had no shields to speak of. All they had was the ship itself and their knowledge of how to fly it. "We need to drop out of hyperspace," Jihu said. "What? That's crazy. In normal space, they'll catch us even faster. Not if we're smart about it." Jihu started calculating coordinates. "There's an asteroid field about 2 light years from here. I hauled cargo through it 6 months ago. I know the layout." Hyun understood immediately. "You want to lose them in the asteroids. The Soul Runner is small and maneuverable. Their ships are bigger, built for speed and open space. In the asteroid field, we have a chance." "A small chance," Hyun muttered, but he was already adjusting the engine output. "It's better than nothing." Coordinates set. Dropping out of hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered as it fell back into normal space. The stars stopped streaking and became points of light again. Ahead of them, Jihu could see the asteroid field, a massive cloud of rock and ice floating in the void. "Here they come," Hyun said. The 3 pirate ships dropped out of hyperspace behind them. They were sleek and dark, built for hunting. Their weapon systems powered up, targeting lock sweeping toward the Soul Runner. "Into the field now," Jihu shouted. Hyun pushed the engines to maximum. The Soul Runner shot forward, diving into the asteroid field just as the first weapons fire streaked past them. Bright bolts of energy carved through the space where they had been seconds before. Inside the field, everything changed. Asteroids tumbled slowly through space, some as small as cars, others as large as buildings. Jihu had to navigate between them, weaving the ship through narrow gaps and around spinning rocks. His left hand danced over the controls, making constant adjustments. "I need more power to the maneuvering thrusters," Jihu called out. "On it." Hyun diverted power from non-essential systems. The ship responded faster, turning sharper. Behind them, the pirate ships entered the field. They were bigger and less agile, but they had more firepower. They didn't need to dodge the asteroids precisely. They just blasted through the smaller ones, turning rock into dust and debris. "They're gaining," Hyun said, watching the scanner. "We need to do something." Jihu spotted a cluster of larger asteroids ahead, grouped close together. "Hold on." He aimed the ship straight at the cluster. At the last second, he rolled the Soul Runner sideways and slipped through a gap between 2 massive rocks. The fit was tight, so tight that Jihu heard the hull scrape against stone. The lead pirate ship tried to follow. It wasn't as lucky. The ship clipped an asteroid with its wing, sending it spinning. The pilot tried to correct but slammed into another rock. There was a bright flash of explosion and the ship broke apart. 2 left, Hyun said, but the other pirates were learning. They spread out, approaching from different angles. They were trying to box in the Soul Runner, force it into a position where it couldn't maneuver. "This isn't working," Jihu said. Sweat dripped down his face. His injured hand throbbed with pain, making it hard to concentrate. "We can't keep this up forever." The ship shook as a weapons blast grazed their stern. Alarms started blaring. Hyun checked the damage reports. "We just lost one of the rear stabilizers. Another hit like that and we're done." The Cubs were huddled in the corner of the cockpit, their eyes wide with fear. They could sense the danger, the desperation. The largest Cub made a soft, whimpering sound that broke Jihu's heart. He had to think. There had to be a way out of this. He looked at the scanner, studying the layout of the asteroid field. Most of the rocks were small to medium-sized, easy to navigate around. But at the center of the field was something else. A massive asteroid, maybe a mile wide, slowly rotating, and it had deep canyons carved into its surface. "I have an idea," Jihu said. "A terrible idea." "I'm listening." "We go into that canyon." Jihu pointed at the massive asteroid on the screen. "It's narrow. The pirate ships are too big to follow. We fly through to the other side and jump to hyperspace while they're trying to go around. Hyun stared at him. That canyon is maybe twice the width of our ship. One mistake and we hit the walls. At this speed, we'd be crushed. I know. And you want to do this with one hand. That's why I need you. Ji-hoo looked at Hyun. I'll handle the navigation. You handle the speed. When I say go faster, you go faster. When I say slow down, you slow down immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Hyun took a deep breath. This is the worst idea I've ever heard. Do you have a better one? Another weapons blast rocked the ship. More alarms. More damage. They were out of time and out of options. No, Hyun said. I don't. Let's do it. Ji-hoo aimed the ship at the massive asteroid. The pirates saw where they were going and increased speed, trying to catch them before they reached the canyon. Weapons fire lit up the space around the Soul Runner. Faster, Ji-hoo said. Hyun pushed the engines harder. The ship shook, metal groaning from the stress. The asteroid grew larger in the view screen, filling their entire field of vision. The canyon entrance appeared, a dark slash across the gray surface of the rock. It looked impossibly narrow, like trying to thread a needle while riding a rocket. Hold steady, Ji-hoo said. His left hand was on the navigation controls, making tiny adjustments. His injured hand lay on his lap, useless. The fingers twitched occasionally, sending jolts of pain up his arm. They entered the canyon at full speed. The walls of the canyon rushed past on both sides, so close Ji-hoo could see individual rocks and cracks in the stone. The Soul Runner flew through the narrow space, its hull barely clearing the walls. There was no room for error. One wrong move and they would crash. Slight right, Ji-hoo said, his voice calm despite the terror he felt. 3 degrees. Hyun adjusted their course. The ship responded, but slowly. Too slowly. The wall was coming up fast. More power to the right thrusters, Ji-hoo said. Hyun diverted power. The ship turned, missing the wall by inches. Behind them, the 2 pirate ships had reached the canyon entrance. They were too big to follow, just as Ji-hoo had hoped. But they didn't give up. They flew over the asteroid instead, trying to reach the other side before the Soul Runner could escape. They're going around, Hyun reported. I know. We just need to be faster. The canyon twisted and turned. Ji-hoo had to navigate by instinct and memory, his mind working faster than he had ever thought possible. Left, right, up, down. Every second brought a new danger, a new obstacle. His injured hand started to seize up. The muscles spasmed, sending waves of agony up his arm. The venom was still in his system, still fighting the anti-venom. Black spots appeared in his vision again. Ji-hoo? Hyun's voice was worried. I'm fine. Keep going, a sharp turn ahead. The tightest one yet. The canyon bent almost 90 degrees, the walls closing in even more. There was barely enough room for the ship to fit. Reduce speed by half, Ji-hoo said. Now, Hyun cut the engines back. The ship slowed, but they were still going too fast. They would never make the turn. Banking left, Ji-hoo said. He rolled the ship onto its side, using every inch of available space. The Soul Runner flew through the turn sideways, the hull scraping against both walls. Sparks flew. Metal screeched. But they made it through, speed back up, Ji-hoo said. Maximum. Hyun pushed the engines to redline. The ship shot forward, racing through the last section of the canyon. Ahead, Ji-hoo could see light. The exit. They burst out of the canyon and into open space. The massive asteroid was behind them now. Ahead, nothing but stars and freedom. The pirates? Ji-hoo asked. They're on the other side of the asteroid. We've got maybe 30 seconds before they have a clear shot. That's all we need. Hyun, prepare the hyperdrive. Charging now. Ji-hoo's injured hand seized up completely. The pain was overwhelming, blinding. He gasped, barely able to breathe. His vision tunneled, the edges going dark. The largest cub jumped onto his lap. The other 2 followed, pressing their small paws against his injured hand. Ji-hoo felt that warmth again, stronger this time. The empathic field from all 3 cubs working together. The pain didn't go away, but something changed. The cubs couldn't heal the damage, but they were doing something else. They were overriding the pain signals, giving Ji-hoo's brain a moment of clarity. His fingers uncurled slightly. Not much, but enough. Hyperdrive ready, Hyun said. Coordinates locked for Lunara Prime. The pirate ships appeared on the scanner, weapons charging. They had one last chance to destroy the Soul Runner. Ji-hoo's hand moved to the hyperdrive controls. His fingers closed around the lever. Even if we could find someone willing to transport protected species, which we can't, there's not enough. Tai Hyun didn't answer right away. He looked at Ji-hoo. then at the cubs, then at the auto dock, still working to save what it could of Jihu's hand. Finally, he let out a long breath and ran his hand through his hair. "You're crazy," Hyun said.
You know that, right?
"I've been told that before. If we do this, we're both finished. No legitimate cargo company will hire a pilot who broke interstellar transport laws. No shipyard will hire a mechanic who helped him." Hyun crossed his arms. "We'll be blacklisted." "I know. The pirates who attacked the Moonweaver might still be out there. They could track us. We could end up dead in space." Hyun's voice was rising now. "And even if we make it, even if we somehow get those cubs home alive, we'll have nothing to show for it. No money, no future, nothing." "I know," Jihu said again. He tried to sit up, and this time he managed it without getting dizzy. "I'm not asking you to throw your life away. I'm just asking you to help me get to my ship. I'll do the rest myself." Hyun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't even make a fist with that hand. How are you going to pilot a ship through hyperspace? How are you going to navigate? How are you going to do any of it?" Jihu looked down at his bandaged hand. Hyun was right. The Soul Runner required two-handed control for most operations. One hand on the navigation console, one hand on the propulsion controls. He couldn't do it alone, not like this, but he had to try. "I'll figure it out," Jihu said. The largest cub woke up and chirped softly. It climbed onto Jihu's lap and pressed its paw against his chest right over his heart. Jihu felt that strange warmth again, the empathic connection the Lunari were known for. The cub wasn't reading his mind, but it was sensing his emotions, his determination, his fear, his desperate need to save them. The cub turned and looked at Hyun. It made a soft sound, almost like a question. "Don't look at me like that," Hyun muttered, but he couldn't look away from the cub's large, reflective eyes. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a mechanic who's been stuck on this terrible planet for 2 years. The cub tilted its head to the side, still watching him. "Stop it," Hyun said. "I mean it." The cub blinked slowly. Hyun groaned and covered his face with his hands. Fine. I'll help you. But when this goes wrong, when we're both floating dead in space, I'm going to haunt you forever." Jihu felt relief wash over him. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. First, we have to get to your ship without being caught." Hyun checked the time. "The merchant will have reported what happened to the local enforcers by now. They don't care about the cubs, but they care about theft. In their eyes, you stole property. I won the cubs fairly. Try explaining that to enforcers who get paid by merchants like him." Hyun started packing supplies into a bag. Medical supplies, tools, water. "We have maybe an hour before they start searching. Where's your ship docked?" "Bay 17, north section of the spaceport." "That's on the other side of the city." Hyun pulled out a data pad and started mapping a route. "We'll have to go through the underground tunnels. It'll take longer, but there are fewer security cameras down there." Jihu carefully stood up. His legs were shaky, but the Autodoc's medication had stabilized him. His hand still throbbed with pain, but at least he wasn't going to pass out anymore. He gathered the 3 cubs, and they climbed up onto his shoulders and clung to his jacket. "Can you walk?" Hyun asked. "I can walk." They left the workshop through a back door that opened into a narrow alley. The sounds of the market were distant here, muffled by stone walls and distance. Hyun led them to a maintenance hatch set into the ground. He pulled it open, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. "After you," Hyun said. Jihu climbed down with one hand, the cubs hanging onto his shoulders. The ladder went deep, at least 30 feet down. At the bottom, he found himself in a wide tunnel lit by emergency lights. The air smelled stale and old. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Hyun climbed down after him and closed the hatch. These tunnels were built for the original colony. They used them to transport goods underground, away from the heat. Now they're mostly abandoned. They walked through the tunnels for what felt like hours. Jihu's sense of direction was completely lost. Every tunnel looked the same, every junction identical. But Hyun seemed to know where he was going, checking his data pad at each turn. The cubs were quiet. They sensed the danger, the need for silence. The largest one sat on Jihu's good shoulder, its tail wrapped around his neck for balance. The other 2 nestled inside his jacket, their small bodies warm against his chest. "Why did you stay?" Jihu asked as they walked. His voice echoed in the tunnel. "On this planet, I mean. 2 years is a long time." Hyun was quiet for a moment. "I couldn't leave. My ship, my tools, everything I owned was locked up in the impound lot. I didn't have enough credits to pay the fees. I've been working odd jobs, saving up, but the fees keep getting higher. It's a scam, really. They know I can't pay, so they keep raising the price. That's terrible. That's Velthara 7. Hyun's voice was bitter. This whole planet is one big scam. Everyone's trying to take advantage of everyone else. I watched it happen every day in that market. People suffering, people dying, and nobody cared because caring doesn't make you money. They turned another corner. The tunnel here was narrower, the ceiling lower. Jihu had to duck to avoid hitting his head. I told myself I was different, Hyun continued. I told myself I would help if I could, but I had to look after myself first. Save up enough credits, get my ship back, get off this planet. Then I could be a good person again. But you helped me today? Yeah, I did. Hyun stopped and turned to look at Jihu. You know why? Because I was tired of making excuses. Tired of walking past that market and pretending I didn't see what was happening. When I saw you put your hand in that viper box. When I saw you choose to risk everything for 3 small creatures you didn't even know. He shook his head. I realized I had been lying to myself. I wasn't going to help anyone once I got off this planet. I was just going to keep making excuses. The cubs chirped softly as if they understood. They kept walking. After another 20 minutes, Hyun stopped at a ladder leading up. This is it. The hatch opens into the maintenance section of the spaceport. Your bay should be 2 corridors over. Jihu climbed the ladder first, moving slowly with his injured hand. At the top, he pushed open the hatch and looked around. The corridor was empty, lit by the harsh white lights of the spaceport. He could hear the distant sound of ships taking off and landing. They made their way to Bay 17. The Soul Runner sat on the landing pad exactly where Jihu had left it. The ship wasn't pretty. It was a standard cargo hauler, old and beaten up from years of use. But it was fast and it was reliable, and right now it was their only hope. Jihu pressed his palm to the security panel. The ship's door opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Inside, the cargo bay was still loaded with the medical supplies he was supposed to deliver. He would have to contact the client later, explain what happened. They wouldn't be happy. They might sue him. But that was a problem for later. The cubs jumped down from his shoulders and explored the ship, sniffing everything with curiosity. This was the first safe place they had been since they were stolen from their homeworld. Hyun went straight to the engine room. Jihu could hear him moving around, checking systems, muttering to himself about outdated components and inefficient fuel lines. Jihu made his way to the cockpit. The pilot's chair was worn but comfortable. He had spent hundreds of hours in this chair, flying through asteroid fields and nebulas, transporting cargo across the galaxy. This ship was his home, his livelihood, his future. He sat down and looked at the control panels. There were dozens of switches, buttons, and monitors. Most of them required 2 hands to operate properly. Navigation needed 1 hand. Propulsion needed another. He tried to work the controls with just his left hand, but it was clumsy and slow. Impossible. It's not going to work, Jihu said quietly. Hyun appeared in the doorway. What? I can't do it. Not with 1 hand. Jihu felt despair settling over him. They had made it this far, but it didn't matter. He couldn't pilot the ship. The cubs were going to die anyway. Hyun studied the control panels. Show me what you need to do. What? Show me. Walk me through the controls. Hyun sat down in the co-pilot's chair. I told you I haven't flown in years, but maybe together we can make it work. Jihu blinked. You would do that? We're already in this deep. Might as well see it through. Hyun cracked his knuckles. Besides, I always wanted to see Lunara Prime. I heard it's beautiful. They spent the next 30 minutes going over the controls. Jihu explained what each system did, how they worked together, what timing was critical. Hyun was a fast learner, his mechanics mind quickly understanding the ship's systems. I'll handle propulsion and power distribution, Hyun said. You focus on navigation and course corrections. When I call out readings, you adjust. When you need more speed, tell me and I'll push the engines. It's going to be rough, Jihu warned. We're going to push these engines harder than they've ever been pushed. They might not make it. Then I'll hold them together with my bare hands if I have to. Hyun grinned. Let's get these cubs home. Jihu started the pre-flight sequence. The ship's engines Jihu pulled his hand free from the box, the crystal key still gripped between his fingers. The viper came with it, fangs buried deep in his flesh. He had to shake his hand hard to make it let go. The creature dropped back into the box and Jihu stumbled backward, cradling his wounded hand against his chest. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt. It started at the bite mark and spread outward in waves of fire. He could feel the venom moving through his blood, burning its way up his arm. His hand was already starting to swell, the skin turning dark around the puncture wounds. "Time!" the merchant called out. He looked at Jihu with genuine surprise. The human did it. He actually did it. The crowd's cheers turned to groans. Many of them had bet against Jihu. They had wanted to see him fail, to watch the cubs cook. But a deal was a deal, even in a lawless place like this. The merchant pressed a button and the cage above the grill began to lower. But he didn't turn off the heat. The plasma grill continued to burn, waves of hot air rising up. The cubs inside the cage cried out as they got closer to the flames. "The cage," Jihu gasped. His vision was starting to blur. "You said, if I won, yes. The cubs are yours. But I did not say I would help you take them." The merchant smiled. "The cage is very hot now, human. Can you reach it with your good hand? Or will you drop them into the fire?" Jihu looked up at the cage. It had stopped about 6 feet above the ground, still hanging over the grill. The metal bars glowed with heat. Even from where he stood, he could feel the waves of burning air. The cubs were pressed against the top of the cage, as far from the heat as they could get, but there was nowhere safe. His right hand was useless now. The fingers were starting to curl inward, muscles spasming from the venom. He couldn't feel his thumb at all. Black spots danced in his vision. He was going to pass out soon. "Need help, human?" Jihu turned. A man stood at the edge of the crowd. He was Korean like Jihu, though older, maybe 40 years old, with graying hair pulled back in a short ponytail. He wore mechanic's clothes, stained with oil and covered in patches from a dozen different ships. A tool belt hung around his waist. "Who are you?" Jihu managed to say. "My name is Hyun. I have a workshop 2 streets over." The man walked forward, studying Jihu's injured hand. "I saw the whole thing. That was either very brave or very stupid. Help me," Jihu said. "Please, the cubs." Hyun looked up at the cage, then at the merchant. "You got a tool to lower that cage safely?" The merchant shrugged. "I might. For the right price, of course." Hyun pulled out his credit chip. He and the merchant negotiated quickly, their voices low. Jihu couldn't follow the conversation. His legs felt weak. He sat down hard on the ground, still holding his swelling hand. A few moments later, Hyun returned with a long metal pole with a hook on the end. He used it to grab the cage and pull it away from the grill, setting it down on the ground away from the heat. The metal was still hot enough to burn, but at least the cubs were safe from the flames. Hyun knelt beside the cage. The cubs pressed against the back, frightened of this new stranger. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm here to help." He used a tool from his belt to break the lock. The cage door swung open. For a moment, the cubs didn't move. Then the largest one crept forward slowly, sniffing the air. It looked at Jihu, then at Hyun, trying to decide if they could be trusted. "Go on," Hyun said. "You're free." The cubs tumbled out of the cage and ran straight to Jihu. They climbed onto his lap, their small bodies trembling. The largest one pressed its head against Jihu's chest. The smallest one curled up in the crook of his good arm. The third cub touched its paw to his injured hand, and Jihu felt a strange warmth spread from the contact. "Lunari cubs," Hyun said quietly. "They're empathic. They can sense emotions. They know you saved them." Jihu tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The venom was working faster now. His whole arm felt like it was on fire. The black spots in his vision were growing larger. "We need to go," Hyun said. "Now, before the venom spreads any further." He helped Jihu to his feet. The cubs didn't want to let go, clinging to Jihu's clothes with their small claws. Hyun scooped up all 3 of them, holding them against his chest with one arm while supporting Jihu with the other. The crowd parted to let them through. The show was over. The merchant had his entertainment and his money from Hyun. Everyone was satisfied except the ones who had lost their bets. Hyun's workshop was a cluttered space filled with ship parts and half-finished repairs. He cleared a metal table with one sweep of his arm, sending tools clattering to the floor. "Lie down," he told Jihu. Jihu collapsed onto the table. His entire body was shaking now. He could feel his heart racing, working too hard to pump poisoned blood through his veins. The cubs climbed up onto the table beside him, their eyes wide with worry. Hyun moved fast. He pulled a medical kit from a shelf and started setting up an AudioBook, a small machine that looked like it had seen better days. The device hummed to life, its scanner moving over Jihu's injured hand. "This is bad," Hyun muttered. "The venom has already damaged a lot of the nerve clusters. Even with treatment—" He didn't finish the sentence. "Will I die?" Jihu asked. His voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "No. The venom isn't lethal to humans. But your hand—" Hyun activated the AudioBook. Jihu felt a sharp sting as needles punctured his arm, injecting anti-venom and pain medication. The AudioBook is fighting it, but it's already spread too far. Jihu closed his eyes. He could feel the medicine working, cooling the fire in his veins. But his hand still felt wrong. The fingers wouldn't respond when he tried to move them. It was like they belonged to someone else now. "Why did you do it?" Hyun asked. He was checking the AudioBook's readings, adjusting settings. "You don't know those cubs. They're not even your species. Why risk your hand? Your career? Everything?" Jihu opened his eyes and looked at the cubs. The largest one was watching him, its head tilted to the side. When their eyes met, the cub made a soft sound like a sigh of relief. "Because they're children," Jihu said simply. "What else was I supposed to do?" Hyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I've been stuck on this planet for 2 years. My ship was impounded over a licensing dispute. In all that time, I've watched a lot of terrible things happen in that market. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I couldn't fix everything. You helped me," Jihu pointed out. "Yeah, I did." Hyun looked at the cubs, then back at Jihu. "Maybe I was tired of standing by and watching." The AudioBook beeped. Hyun read the display and his face grew serious. "The venom damaged about 40% of the nerve clusters in your hand. The AudioBook can save your hand, but you're going to lose fine motor control. Maybe permanently." Jihu absorbed this news. Fine motor control. That meant piloting would be difficult, maybe impossible. Loading cargo would be harder. His entire job depended on his ability to use both hands precisely. "Can I still fly?" he asked. "Maybe, with time and therapy. But it will never be the same." Hyun paused. "I'm sorry." Jihu looked at his hand. It was bandaged now, the AudioBook's needle still buried in his arm. He tried to make a fist, but his fingers barely moved. 2 years of work. 3 years of building a career. All of it changed in 30 seconds because he decided to save 3 small creatures he didn't know. The largest cub leaned against his good hand. Its fur was soft and warm. It made that sighing sound again, and Jihu felt a wave of calm wash over him. The cub's empathic abilities, sharing its emotions with him. It wasn't healing, but it was comfort. "Worth it," Jihu whispered. Hyun raised an eyebrow. "You might change your mind when the medical bills come in." Before Jihu could respond, a loud beep came from Hyun's communication array. The mechanic walked over to check it, frowning at the display. "What is it?" Jihu asked. Hyun's face went pale. "It's a distress beacon." "Automated message. A ship called the Moonweaver." He looked at the cubs. "It's a Lunari rescue vessel. They were coming to recover stolen cubs from Velthara 7. "Were?" Jihu sat up too fast. His head spun, and he had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. "The message is 3 hours old. The ship was attacked by pirates 3 systems away. The crew—" Hyun's voice trailed off. He didn't need to finish. "They're dead," Jihu said flatly. "Yes." The cubs sensed the change in mood. They pressed closer to Jihu, their empathic abilities picking up on the fear and sadness in the room. The smallest one started to whimper. "How long can they survive away from their homeworld?" Jihu asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Hyun checked his data files. Lunari cubs need to return to their home planet within 72 hours. Something about the atmosphere, the light from their moon. Without it, they go into decline. It's fatal. How long has it been since they were taken? According to the distress beacon, the cubs were stolen 5 days ago. Hyun did the math in his head. They have less than 2 days left. Jihu looked at the cubs. They didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. They knew something was wrong. The largest cub looked up at him with those big, reflective eyes, and Jihu saw the question there. "Will you save us again? Where is their homeworld?" Jihu asked. "Lunara Prime. It's 6 days away at standard cruising speed." Hyun shook his head. "There's no way." The merchant circled around Jihu like a predator. The crowd pressed closer, sensing new entertainment. Above them, the timer continued its countdown. 6 minutes and 30 seconds. On my homeworld we have a tradition, the merchant said. His voice carried across the plaza, making sure everyone could hear. A game of chance. Very simple. Very fair. Jihu didn't trust the smile on the merchant's face, but he had no choice. What kind of game? The merchant clapped his hands. One of his assistants brought forward a black box made of metal and glass. It was about the size of a small crate, with a circular opening on top. Through the glass sides, Jihu could see movement inside. Something was alive in there. This is a Krellian viper box, the merchant explained. Inside are 5 vipers from my homeworld. Beautiful creatures. Very sensitive to movement and heat. Jihu leaned closer. He could see them now. The vipers were thin and black, their scales reflecting purple in the light. They moved slowly, coiling around each other in the bottom of the box. Each one was about as long as his arm. The game is simple, the merchant continued. At the bottom of the box is a crystal key. You put your hand inside and take the key. You have 30 seconds. If you succeed, the cubs are yours free, no cost, and if I fail, Jihu asked, though he already knew the answer wouldn't be good, the vipers will bite you. Their venom attacks the nerves. Very painful. Your hand will be useless for many months, maybe forever. The merchant shrugged, and the cubs still get cooked. But you tried, yes? Very heroic, the crowd murmured with excitement. This was better than they had hoped for. The merchant was a showman, and he knew how to give people what they wanted. Jihu stared at the box. He had seen viper bites before. There was a worker on a mining station who had been bitten by something similar. The man's hand had curled into a permanent claw, fingers frozen and useless. He couldn't work anymore. Couldn't feed himself. His whole life changed because of one bite. Jihu was a cargo hauler. He needed his hands to operate ship controls, to load cargo, to do the 1,000 small tasks that kept him employed. Losing the use of his hand meant losing his job, losing his ship, losing everything he had built over 3 years. The timer showed 5 minutes and 40 seconds. He looked up at the cage. The cubs were watching him. The largest one had stopped trying to comfort the others. It just stared at Jihu with those big, reflective eyes. There was no hope in that stare anymore. Just acceptance. The cub knew that nobody was going to save them. Jihu thought about his sister again. Sora worked with injured animals every day. She had told him once about a dog that had been hit by a car. The dog needed surgery, expensive surgery that the owner couldn't afford. The shelter was going to put the dog down. Sora had used her own money to pay for it. 3 months of salary gone in one day. When Jihu asked her why, she had looked at him like he was crazy. Because something else mattered more, she had said. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about deciding that something else matters more than your fear. Jihu's hand was shaking. He stared at the viper box, at the slow movement of the creatures inside. 30 seconds. That was all he had. 30 seconds to reach past 5 aggressive vipers and grab a key at the bottom of the box. I need to know the rules, Jihu said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. Can I look inside first? Of course, the merchant said generously. Look all you want. But once you put your hand inside, the timer starts. 30 seconds. You pull your hand out early, you lose. Jihu bent over the box. The opening at the top was just wide enough for his hand and wrist. The vipers sensed him and moved faster, agitated by his presence. He could see the crystal key at the bottom glinting in the light. It was placed in the exact center, where he would have to reach past all 5 vipers to get it. The vipers were coiled around each other, but they weren't sleeping. Their heads moved, tracking the heat from his body. He could see their tongues flickering in and out, tasting the air. They were ready to strike at anything that disturbed them. These vipers, Jihu said, they react to heat and movement? Very good, human, yes, they are attracted to warmth. They will want to investigate your hand. And when you move too quickly... The merchant made a striking motion with his hand. The timer showed 4 minutes and 50 seconds. The merchant was heating up the grill slowly, making the show last longer. Jihu could see waves of heat rising up toward the cage. The cubs were panting now, their fur starting to darken with sweat. Jihu stepped back from the viper box. He looked at his right hand, flexing the fingers. This hand had helped him build his life. He had used it to pilot his ship through asteroid fields, to repair broken equipment, to shake hands with clients and make deals. It was a good hand. A working hand. But what good was a working hand if he used it to walk away from children who were being murdered? 5 minutes, someone in the crowd called out. The aliens were getting impatient. Jihu rolled up his sleeve. His hand was still shaking, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had to think. The Vipers reacted to movement and heat. Fast movements would make them strike. But if he moved too slowly, he would run out of time. He looked at the cubs one more time. The smallest one had started crying again. The sound cut through everything else, a pure note of terror and pain. It was the sound of someone who knew they were going to die. "I accept," Jihu said. The crowd erupted in cheers. The merchant smiled his sharp-toothed smile and gestured to the box. "Whenever you are ready, human." "The cubs have 4 minutes left. I suggest you hurry." Jihu positioned himself over the opening. He took a deep breath, trying to slow his racing heart. His hand hovered over the hole. Below, the Vipers sensed him. They uncoiled slightly, their heads turning upward. "Begin," the merchant shouted. Jihu plunged his hand into the box. The Vipers reacted instantly. They moved toward the heat of his hand, coiling around his wrist and forearm. Their scales were cool and dry, sliding across his skin. He could feel their muscles contracting and relaxing as they investigated this new warm thing in their territory. 25 seconds. The merchant called out. Jihu's fingers stretched downward, feeling for the key. The Vipers were all around his hand now, wrapping tighter. He couldn't see what he was doing. He had to work by touch alone, carefully moving his fingers past the coiling bodies. One Viper slid across his knuckles, another wrapped around his thumb. He could feel their heads bumping against his palm, tongues flickering against his skin. Any sudden movement and they would strike. 20 seconds. His middle finger touched something hard and smooth. The key. But it was at the very bottom, and there were 2 Vipers between his hand and the crystal. He would have to push past them. 15 seconds. Jihu slowly, carefully, moved his hand lower. A Viper tightened around his wrist. He felt the pressure of its body, the incredible strength in something so thin. His finger touched the key again, but he couldn't get a grip on it. 10 seconds. The crowd was counting now, their voices rising. Above him, the cubs were silent, watching. The heat from the grill was intense now, shimmering in the air. Jihu pushed his hand all the way to the bottom. His fingers closed around the key. He had it. But now he had to pull his hand back up past all 5 Vipers without making them strike. 5 seconds. He started to withdraw his hand. Slowly. So slowly. The Vipers shifted around his arm, confused by the movement. One of them raised its head, jaw opening slightly. 3 seconds. Almost there. His hand was halfway out. The key was clutched in his fingers, his grip tight. Just a little more. 1 second. A Viper struck. The pain was instant and terrible, like someone had shoved a burning needle deep into his hand. The fangs sank into the soft flesh between his thumb and first finger, and he felt the venom pump into his blood. But he didn't drop the key. The heat hit Jihu's face the moment he stepped into the market district. It wasn't the natural warmth of a sun or the comfortable heat from a building. This was different. This was the kind of heat that came from plasma grills and cooking fires, mixed with the smell of burning meat and exotic spices that made his stomach turn. Jihu pulled his jacket closer despite the warmth. The scorched bazaar on Velthara 7 was exactly as people had warned him. Dangerous. Lawless. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. He was here to deliver medical supplies to a colony on the far side of the planet. Simple job. Get in, drop off the cargo, get out. That was the plan. He walked through narrow streets filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some had scales, others had fur. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Merchants shouted in languages he didn't understand, trying to sell everything from weapons to strange fruits that glowed in the dim light. Jihu kept his head down and his hand on his credit chip. 3 years of hauling cargo across the outer rim had taught him to be careful in places like this. The food district was the worst part of the market. Jihu had to pass through it to reach his delivery point on the other side. He tried not to look at the stalls and what they were selling. Some things were better left unknown. But then he heard a sound that made him stop walking. It was a cry. High-pitched and frightened. It reminded him of the time his sister Sora had found a puppy trapped in a storm drain back on Earth. That same desperate, helpless sound that made your chest hurt. Jihu turned toward the noise. A crowd had gathered in a large plaza. Aliens of different species stood in a circle watching something. They were laughing and placing bets. passing credit chips between clawed hands and tentacles. Jihu pushed through the crowd, though everything in his brain told him to walk away. In the center of the plaza stood a Krellian merchant. Jihu recognized the species from his hauler training. Krellians were big, with gray skin like stone and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. This one wore expensive robes and had gold rings on his fingers. A merchant who did good business. Above the merchant's head hung a metal cage. It was suspended by chains over a large plasma grill. The grill wasn't on yet, but Jihu could see it was ready. And inside the cage were 3 small creatures. They were covered in soft fur that shimmered between blue and silver. They had large eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Their ears were long and pointed, pressed flat against their heads in fear. They couldn't have been bigger than house cats. The 3 creatures huddled together in the center of the cage, as far from the bars as they could get. The smallest one was crying. Jihu felt his stomach drop. He knew what these creatures were. Lunari cubs. He had seen pictures in a conservation brief 6 months ago. The Lunari were a protected species. Their young were sentient, capable of feeling complex emotions just like humans. Killing them was against galactic law. But Velthara 7 didn't care about galactic law. This planet existed in contested space, where nobody had full authority. The perfect place for people who wanted to do business without rules. A digital timer above the cage showed 10 minutes. 10 minutes until the grill would reach cooking temperature. The merchant was taking bets on how long the cubs would last before they stopped moving. Jihu watched as the cubs pressed closer together. The largest one wrapped its small arms around the other 2, trying to protect them. Its eyes were wide with fear, but also with understanding. It knew what was about to happen. The crowd cheered as the merchant reached for the grill controls. Jihu's heart pounded in his chest. He thought about his sister Sora, who worked at an animal rehabilitation center back on Earth. She had always told him that the true measure of a person was what they did when nobody was watching, when doing the right thing cost them something. But this would cost more than something. Interfering here could start an interspecies incident. It could get him banned from half the trading posts in the sector. It could get him killed. The timer showed 9 minutes. Jihu looked at the cubs again. The smallest one had stopped crying. It just stared down at the grill below, its tiny body shaking. 3 children about to die for entertainment. 3 sentient beings who understood exactly what was happening to them. He thought about walking away. He thought about finishing his delivery and leaving this planet. He thought about how he could tell himself it wasn't his problem, that this was just how things worked out here in the lawless zones. But then the largest cub looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and Jihu saw something he couldn't ignore. He saw fear, yes, but also hope. A desperate hope that anyone would help. Jihu took a breath and pushed through the crowd. His legs felt like lead, but he kept moving forward. The aliens around him grumbled and cursed as he stepped into their view. The Krellian merchant looked down at him with amusement. "Human," the merchant said in rough galactic common. "You want something?" Jihu's hand moved to his credit chip in his pocket. His mouth was dry, but he forced the words out. "How much for the cubs?" The crowd went quiet. The merchant's red eyes gleamed with interest. A slow smile spread across his stone-like face, revealing teeth filed to sharp points. "You want to buy them?" The merchant laughed. "Why? You want to cook them yourself?" "I want to buy them," Jihu repeated. "Name your price." The timer showed 8 minutes. The merchant studied Jihu for a long moment. Then he named a price that made Jihu's heart sink. 50,000 credits, nearly triple what Jihu made in a whole year, more money than he had ever seen in one place. "I don't have that much," Jihu said quietly. The merchant shrugged, then stepped back and let others enjoy the show. Jihu stood there, frozen. The crowd started to lose interest, turning back to watch the timer. 7 minutes now. The cubs were crying again, all 3 of them making that terrible sound that cut through all the noise of the market. "Wait," Jihu said. "There has to be another way." The merchant paused, one hand on the grill controls. He looked at Jihu with new interest, like a cat that had found a new toy to play with. "Another way?" The merchant's smile grew wider. "Perhaps. You like games, human?"